Sudden money does not make you rich. It puts you in an airlock. That is the first truth I want to burn into your mind, because almost everybody gets this wrong. They think sudden wealth is a celebration event, a reward event, a permission slip, a new life beginning with champagne, revenge shopping, and a dramatic resignation letter typed with one finger and a smile. Sudden money is a pressure event, and pressure events do not reward excitement. They reward containment. If you open both doors of the airlock at once, you do not become free. You explode. That is what happens to most people who get rich suddenly. Not all at once. Not in one cinematic disaster. They explode structurally. Privacy goes first, then spending, then identity, then relationships, then judgment, then the illusion of control. Then finally, the money itself. The account may still look large for a little while, but the internal rupture has already happened. The system is leaking. The future is gone. The countdown has started. That is why the source document is right to say that most people who receive a massive windfall are not ready for it, and why so many lottery winners end up broke again within only a few years. The money arrives before the operating system capable of carrying it exists. Faithful cite fate turn 70 file 0 fay a fool, and his money are soon parted. People repeat that line because it sounds wise. I care about it because it is mechanical. A man without a system is not holding wealth, he is holding pressure. Pressure without structure becomes rupture. I have watched this my whole life. Inheritances, windfalls, lottery winners, athletes, entertainers, business sellers, people who receive money far earlier or faster than their identity. Their discipline or their understanding had any right to handle the public always frames the story in the wrong way. They ask, how could someone lose that much money? I ask a colder question, how could someone with no containment protocol possibly keep it? That is the correct question. Because sudden money is not simply a larger version of normal money. Normal money arrives in earned pieces. Paycheck by paycheck, contract by contract, distribution by distribution. It gives you time to adjust, time to make mistakes, time to absorb the emotional meaning of what money can do to your life. Sudden money does the opposite. It arrives before your psychology has adapted, before your social circle has adapted, before your family dynamics have adapted, before your habits have adapted, before your nervous system has adapted. So the old broke self wakes up inside a much larger account and begins making broke decisions at rich scale. That is how fortunes die. The source material gives the clean version of the first move. Do not let anyone know. Faithful cite fay turn 70 file 0 fay. That is not paranoia. That is airlock procedure. I call it the silence seal. The moment people know you have sudden money, they stop seeing you clearly. Some will love you more loudly than before. Some will need you more urgently than before. Some will become creative in the way only desperate or entitled people become creative. Some will ask, some will hint, some will guilt, some will tell you stories, some will come with opportunities, some will come with emergencies, some will come with tears, some will come with fake sophistication, some will come with, I never ask anyone for help. And your old emotional reflexes will betray you because you still remember what it feels like not to have much. That is what makes sudden wealth so dangerous for decent people. Greedy people are easy to diagnose, they grab, but decent people can be drained more elegantly. They become ashamed of having more than others. They try to repair old family imbalances with money. They try to heal childhood wounds with generosity. They try to prove they are still normal. They try to buy love cleanly. They try to remove guilt with giving. That is not wisdom. That is leakage dressed as kindness. This is why silence is the first line of defense. Privacy is not just about protection from criminals. It is about protection from social reclassification. The moment people mentally move you from person to funding source, your relationships begin to distort. Their motives may not even be fully conscious. That does not make them less dangerous. Silence keeps the pressure inside the airlock while you build the system. The second move from the source is also exactly right. Pay off all your debt. Faithful cite fay turn 70 file 0 fay. I call this clearing the rubble. Before you do anything dramatic, you remove the parasites. Consumer debt, predatory balances, pressure-bearing liabilities, the monthly claims that were quietly renting your future. Debt is not just an expense. It is a corridor through which panic can reach you. If you get a windfall and leave old high-interest chains attached, you are doing something insane. You are standing in a vault full of oxygen while still smoking the same cigarette you were smoking before. Pay the debt, then stop. That second part matters as much as the first. Most people understand the first half emotionally. They feel relief. They want to erase the old pain. Good. But then a new trap opens. They mistake the absence of old debt for permission to create new debt, new house, new car, new toys, new signatures, new obligations, new monthly tribute. That is how people convert blessing into maintenance burden faster than anyone watching from the outside can understand. The source document says exactly the right thing here. Pay off the old debt. Do not create new debt just because the money makes it seem harmless. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. This is where rich-looking poverty begins. A person receives a windfall, cleans up yesterday's damage, and then rebuilds tomorrow's fragility in more luxurious materials. That is not a strategy. That is addiction with nicer furniture. The third instruction in the source may sound almost boring, but it is one of the deepest. Do not quit your job yet. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. I call this the rhythm rule. Sudden money changes your balance of power. It should not immediately destroy your rhythm. People assume the fantasy of wealth is quitting, telling the boss off, walking out, burning the bridge, posting the smile. But the source is correct. Quitting too fast is often the first domino in personal bankruptcy, not because work is holy, because structure is holy in transitional moments. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. Humans are not built well for instant vacuum. When the old structure disappears overnight, the mind begins spending to create stimulation, identity, movement, and relief. Boredom becomes expensive, pride becomes expensive, idle time becomes expensive. You start exploring options, which often means leaking money in the direction of every half-formed desire that never had room to breathe before. This is why I say do not remove the scaffolding before the new structure exists. Keep the job for now. Not because the salary matters more than the windfall, because the rhythm matters more than the fantasy. The source text makes another subtle point many people miss. Once the money arrives, your relationship to the job changes, even if the job does not. That is powerful. The power is not in quitting dramatically. The power is in knowing you could. That alone changes the way you speak, negotiate, and endure nonsense. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. Sudden wealth, handled correctly, should first buy back refusal power, not spectacle. That is a much more intelligent use of money. The fourth move is what I consider the core of the airlock. Secure the money and let it sit for a while. The source recommends roughly 6 months of not touching it except for immediate necessary cleanup. That is wise. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. I call this thermal cooling. Most people think the money needs to be deployed immediately. It does not. You do. You are the unstable component. The account can sit perfectly still while your mind goes through shock. Fantasy, greed, revenge, fear, family pressure, identity confusion, and the endless procession of plans that feel brilliant on Monday and idiotic on Thursday. A 6-month cooling period does not exist because the money is confused. It exists because you are. That is a hard sentence. It is also true every day after a windfall. Your internal story about that money will change. First, you will want to fix everything. Then you will want to enjoy everything. Then you will want to protect everything. Then you will want to become someone else. Then you will want to prove something. Then you will want to hide. Then you will want to help everyone. Then you will suspect everyone. Then you will want to build an empire. Then you will want to vanish. That is why the cooling period matters. Not touching the money is not passivity. It is decompression. The fifth move in the source is one of the smartest and most underappreciated. Invest in yourself first. Learn before you move. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. I call this installing the operator. If you did not build the money, then you probably do not yet have the instincts required to keep and grow the money. That is not an insult. It is a category difference. Earning suddenly is not the same as understanding capital. Windfall money in untrained hands behaves the way high performance machines behave in the hands of people who have never driven one. it amplifies mistakes. That is why education must come before deployment. The source says it clearly. You need to become financially literate to understand how money works before you start moving it around, or you will become reckless or easy to manipulate. Fay file site Fay turn 70, file 0 Fay. Exactly. And let me sharpen that. If you inherit or win a large sum and remain financially na-fay, you become prey. The predators may wear suits, they may speak softly, they may come through referrals, they may even be charming, but the outcome is the same. Untrained capital attracts polished extraction. So before you buy, before you invest, before you diversify, before you start a business, before you lend, before you rescue anyone, install the operator. That means learning basic asset classes, understanding taxes, understanding cash flow versus capital, understanding compounding, understanding drawdowns, understanding what an advisor really does and what incentives he is carrying into the room, understanding what permanent purchasing power means, understanding what a sustainable withdrawal actually looks like, understanding the difference between consumption and allocation. This is not glamorous, neither is staying rich. The sixth move is controversial only to people who think independence means constant switching. Do not switch financial advisors immediately, especially in inherited wealth situations where the previous relationship may have been part of the machine that preserved the fortune. That is a fair insight from the source. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay I call this inherited circuitry. If a wealthy relative dies and leaves behind a functioning capital structure, it is foolish to assume that the first thing you should do is rip out the wiring. The advisor may be competent, the systems may be good, the documents, tax posture, trust structures, and asset location may already be doing exactly what they should be doing. A sudden change made by an untrained heir is often not an upgrade. It is vandalism. That does not mean blind trust. It means audit before replacement, understand the relationship, understand the fee structure, understand the fiduciary obligations, understand what is actually being done, and only then decide whether the system deserves to stay. This is adult capital behavior, not reflexive rebellion. The seventh move from the source is excellent because it contains more wisdom than people first hear. Get comfortable, but do not get rich looking. Pay off the house if that meaningfully fixes your life, but do not run to the rich neighborhood. Do not buy everyone a car. Do not remodel your identity. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0. Fay I call this the comfortable zone. Sudden wealth should first remove pressure, not create theater. There is a gigantic difference between comfort and display. Comfort is paying off the debt that was choking you. Comfort is fixing the roof. Stabilizing the household, removing the panic. Comfort is a decent place to live, a sane vehicle, a calmer calendar, a healthier body, a cleaner financial structure. Display is different. Display is the house that comes with permanent taxes, maintenance, security, signaling, and a friend group you now have to finance with your own insecurity. Display is buying liabilities to announce a new identity before the inner self has matured enough to carry it. Display is the athlete trap, and the source is right to call it out. Big homes do not just cost their purchase price. They create recurring drag. And recurring drag is how sudden fortunes start bleeding invisibly. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay. The goal is not to become rich looking. The goal is to become structurally hard to kill. The eighth move is one of the hardest for decent people. Do not invest in your friend S business or lend the money casually. The source is right. Once people know, requests begin. Fay file site Fay turn 70 file 0 Fay I call this emotional lending. Most of the time these are not real investments. They are relationship stress tests with invoices attached. Money plus friendship is a volatile chemical mixture when one side did not earn the money and the other desperately needs it. If you give the money and they fail, the capital goes and the relationship often goes with it. If you refuse, the relationship may still suffer. But at least your children keep their future. That is not cruelty. That is systems thinking. Your windfall is your safety net. A safety net with holes is not a safety net. And do not soften this principle with sentimental language. Almost nobody asking you for sudden money capital is asking at the right time and the right structure with the right governance. and without their own desperation distorting the proposal. The ninth move follows naturally. Do not start a business immediately. The source is correct to warn against the fantasy. 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Sudden money does not turn inexperience into operating skill. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei I call this the founder hallucination. Windfall recipients often feel a violent urge to become a boss. They mistake capital possession for operator competence. They look at existing businesses and say, I could do that. No, perhaps you could not. Looking at a business from the outside is not the same as building one under pressure. Sudden wealth creates ego heat. Ego heat makes entrepreneurship look easy. It is not easy. Starting a business right after a windfall is often just another form of emotional spending, only with spreadsheets. Start small. If you must test, learn. Take advice, but do not mistake the money for a business brain you have not yet built. The 10th move in the source is to prepare for change, and that sounds so mild that many people miss the violence inside it. More money means bigger targets, more scams, more lawsuits, more emotional leverage, more attempts to separate you from your own balance sheet. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei call this target migration. Your problems do not disappear with money, they become more complex. A lot of poor people think wealth makes life simple. It solves some primitive pressures and introduces higher order ones. You now need privacy boundaries, legal awareness, better documentation, a slower tongue, a calmer social life, more skepticism. This is another reason the cooling period matters. The old you is not ready for the new attack surface. The 11th move is health. The source is right here too. Get the full checkup. Fix what neglect allowed to grow. Build better body systems. Use the privilege Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei I call this biological asset recovery. There is no point inheriting or winning enough money to improve life only to carry forward the same untreated body that old stress and bad habits were destroying. Wealth without health is a rich man's version of short-term thinking. Your body is now an asset you can finally service correctly. Do it. A full workup. Dental, sleep, nutrition, movement, stress correction, mental health if needed. You do not buy a fortune and then continue living inside preventable decline. That is another form of broke thinking. The 12th move is the one most people remember, but almost nobody respects deeply enough. The 5% rule. Or more broadly, the idea that the principle is a money tree and you should learn to live off prudent harvest rather than chopping the tree down for firewood. That image from the source is exactly right. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei I call this harvest discipline. A sudden windfall feels infinite because the number is larger than anything you have held before. That feeling is a liar. The money is finite unless turned into a productive system that throws off annual fruit. If you consume principle aggressively, you are not enjoying life. You are sawing through the trunk. This is one of the most important identity shifts in wealth. You must stop thinking like a spender and start thinking like a steward. The principle is not a giant checking account. It is a tree. If tended, it produces. If cut, it briefly burns warm and then leaves you colder than before. This is why your spending rate matters more than your fantasies. Live off a prudent percentage. Reinforce the trunk. Protect the roots. Let time do the heavy lifting. Sudden wealth managed as harvest becomes dynasty. Sudden wealth managed as appetite becomes a cautionary tale. The 13th move is about children, and the source is wise to say protect your kids from the money, trusts, allowances, controlled flows, legacy structures. Yes, Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei I call this generational containment. Money does strange things to children when it arrives without architecture. It removes incentives too early. It invites identity confusion. It turns adulthood into a performance against invisible abundance. It gives purchasing power before judgment. That is not love. That is exposure. Real legacy wealth is not created by handing children an unlocked vault. It is created by controlling access while preserving benefit. Allowance structures, trust structures, rules delayed control. Education before access. That is not cold. That is how rich families avoid manufacturing weak heirs. The 14th move may look like moral fluff to some readers, but it is financial architecture in disguise. Do not cheat on your partner. The source says this should go without saying, and then immediately explains why it so often does not. Money changes attraction patterns, temptations rise, mistakes become massively more expensive. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn, 70 File 0 Fei I, call this relational leakage. People think affairs are emotional events. They are also capital events. They split households, trigger legal costs, trigger asset division, trigger child support, trigger destruction of trust at the exact moment. Trust should have been one of the strongest assets protecting the new wealth. Wealth should strengthen the family system, not tempt you into detonating it. The 15th move from the source is to play it safe. Normally that phrase is too soft for me. Here it is exactly right. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei I call this post. Windfall humility, you already got lucky. Do not insult luck by demanding a second miracle immediately. Do not chase shady businesses. Do not try to double it fast. Do not confuse windfall with genius act. As the source says, almost like the event never happened, except that your debt, pressure, and fragility were reduced and your structure improved. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0 Fei, that is a much more intelligent goal than the average person understands. You do not need a richer lifestyle. You need a less vulnerable one. You do not need a louder life. You need a more durable one. You do not need the world to see the change. You need the balance sheet, the family system, the health system, the tax structure, the legal structure, and the emotional system to survive it. This is why the bonus point in the source about balance is actually more important than it sounds. Balance is not a spiritual slogan here. It is a structural imperative. Sudden money creates extreme asymmetry between resources and maturity. Balance is the process of closing that gap before it closes you. Fei Phyllosite Fei Turn 70 File 0. Fei, let me say it even more clearly. If you get rich all of a sudden, your first job is not to enjoy the money. It is to survive the money. Enjoyment comes later. Later is what you are trying to buy. That is the final philosophical twist most people miss. They think sudden wealth buys immediate pleasure. The smarter truth is that sudden wealth, if contained properly, buys time. Time to think, time to heal, time to learn, time to renegotiate the terms of your working life, time to choose your pace, time to build a life that is not constantly being extorted by panic. That is what real wealth is. Not a luxury showroom, a lower pressure existence with higher quality options. So if sudden money ever hits your account, remember this. Do not celebrate first. Seal the airlock, silence, debt removal, rhythm preservation, thermal cooling, operator installation, inherited circuitry audit, comfort without theater, no emotional lending, no founder hallucination, target migration defense, biological asset recovery, harvest discipline, generational containment, relational loyalty, post-windfall humility. That is the protocol. Not because caution is glamorous, because rupture is expensive, and the people who keep sudden fortunes are rarely the people with the biggest appetites. They are the people with the strongest containment. So here is the final test. If life suddenly handed you enough money to rewrite your future tomorrow, would you use it to become more visible? Or would you be disciplined enough to become more secure? Because that is the difference between the blessing and the curse, not the amount, the protocol.